And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Don't forget, we're kicking off our Penny Patrol. If you would like to help us collect pennies for the Boise Rescue Mission as part of Miller's mission, go to KIDOTalkRadio.com. I've had a few people send me emails, and essentially what we're looking for are donations, a specific amount, which I'll tell you, and then we'll shoot a video. We'll have you help us urge folks to help our friends at the Boise Rescue Mission. Joining us now, the author of Clarence Thomas and the Lost Constitution is Myron Magnet. Mr. Magnet, thank you for joining us here in Idaho. Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, first of all, if you could, tell us your thoughts on the current makeup of the Supreme Court.
Well, it's kind of hard to know just this minute because it looks like we've got four people on one side, more or less, and four on the other, and Chief Justice Roberts vacillating from one side to the other. And, it's not really a good idea for a justice to be a politician. I remember somebody once saying about that famous switch in time that saved nine when New Deal Justice Owen Roberts decided that he'd allow the New Deal to go forward and started reversing all his rulings after that. Somebody said, what's the point of protecting the court at the expense of jettisoning the Constitution? So we're going to have to see if Clarence Thomas, the most fervid originalist on the court, is able to bring enough of his colleagues with him to really to change the direction of the court, which is what he wants to do.
Well, and we go back to, and thank you for writing this book on Clarence Thomas, sir.
I love the man.
But such the opposite of David Souter. And
Absolutely.
And if you could you share with us David Souter, what he did to the court, and why conservatives are still, with the exception of Clarence Thomas and a few others, are very still nervous about anyone we seem to appoint to the Supreme Court?
Well, I don't know what happens to them when they get on the court. Look at Earl Warren, who was pretty much a conservative attorney general and governor of California, and then flopped completely over when he got onto the court. I think that Souter is a prime example of what went wrong with the court. There are kind of three steps in which the court transformed the Constitution from what the framers wrote in 1787, which was this magnificent document aimed at protecting something unexampled in human history, which was the idea of government as nothing more than a protection for your right to pursue your own happiness in your own way, in your family, in your local community. This is a modern idea. And when the court started saying, okay, well, now the federal government can have control over the total economy in the New Deal, okay, now it's all right to have all these administrative agencies that make laws like a legislature, carry them out like an executive, and adjudicate and punish infractions of them like a judiciary. These are not real judges. They are not real legislators, but they nevertheless have real teeth. You can say that these experts are more efficient than laws made by the people's elected representatives. However, it is not democratic self-government. And I can't think of any more modern idea, even though it is protected by a 230-year-old document, than the idea of self-government. I do not like the idea of government by enlightened despots because the Enlightenment tends to evaporate before the despotism does.
Myron Magnet joining us, Clarence Thomas and the Lost Constitution, Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. What type of man is Clarence Thomas? We always have cheered for him. Our heart breaks when he's been vilified by the crazies on the left. But what makes this man of integrity continue to fight for people?
Well, he was, as you know, he was born in a kerosene-lit shanty in a Georgia swamp, grew up in segregated Savannah, and everything was segregated, went to a segregated Catholic school where the nuns, however, taught him that all men are created equal. And he has that belief in his heart. And even though he grew up experiencing government oppression, because after all, the law told him he couldn't drink from this water fountain, he couldn't walk across this park, but he has seen in his lifetime the dream of Thomas Jefferson that all men are created equal and equally endowed with rights become a reality. And he takes it as his calling to, as he says, this is perfectible. And his calling is to help perfect it. One of the things that really made him is that, he was born poor. He was a second-class citizen in Georgia, but he was brought up by a grandfather who was, although really semi-literate, a self-made entrepreneur. He had this little fuel oil delivery company, and he put his two grandsons, who were still little boys, to work after Catholic school delivering oil, work on weekends delivering oil, and farming all summer long to keep them away from street culture and to teach them this absolutely rock-solid work ethic. And what his grandfather would always tell the boys is, where there's a will, there's a way. There's no such thing as can't. And this expanded from a personal creed to a political one in Justice Thomas. Essentially what he's saying is, look, now in America, for all the flaws that were there in the early days, flaws which the founders well knew about and deplored but couldn't do anything about, for all those flaws, where there's a will, there is now indisputably a way. And what any free, self-governing democracy needs is citizens who understand that they are not victims, but they are people who can forge their own fate because there is the opportunity and the freedom to do so, and they're responsible for how their lives turn out.
And we're talking about Clarence Thomas and the Lost Constitution. Myron Magnet joining us, the author. Kevin Miller here, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Sir, is he living the manifestation of the American dream, considering, as you've detailed in your book and on the radio, such a humble beginning?
Well, isn't it amazing, Kevin? Here we have, in our lifetime, a guy who starts in a kerosene-lit shanty in the swamp and goes to the Supreme Court bench. I mean, it's not quite log cabin to the White House, but it's pretty close. So, yeah, I mean, he is the personification of the American dream. And what I think that everybody watching him should understand is that what made that American dream a reality for him was his iron will and grit and sense of personal responsibility to fight through. He went through lots of indignities. He experienced not just segregation, but just flat-out and nasty racism. He went through those awful hearings, of course, which showed him just what a life and death matter the various political parties take the court to be. But he came out of it a person who had a most generous idea for his fellow Americans that they should be self-governing. And he himself, no matter what, he is going to try to make the lot of his fellows better. And, one of the things that pains him most, he says, is the vilification that he gets from fellow black Americans. He says everything he has done has been to try to help, not hurt, and that there is such an investment among black so-called leaders, he would say, in peddling victimology and saying that the government needs to fix it, pains him very much. And what he learned, he was for 9 years a civil rights official starting in the Reagan administration. What he learned is there is no governmental solution to Black America's problems. Everything that the government has tried to do, forced busing, affirmative action, it's just made things worse. And he's seen it in his own life, and then he's seen it sort of from one step removed running these agencies and just, looking at the data and saying, wait, have we done any good here? And so his takeaway is that for Black Americans, as for all Americans, your fate is your own responsibility. Every American has to step up to the plate and make whatever life it is that he wants to make because he has the freedom to do it.
Myron Magnet joining us, Clarence Thomas and the Lost Constitution. You detail a lot of his writings, a lot of his rulings. For those of us that aren't as politically astute or study the legal scholars like you do, sir, what message would you send to us and promote us or prod us to check out your work?
Well, I'm not a legal scholar. I'm just a journalist, and the reason I wrote this book, Kevin, is because my last book, The Founders at Home, I wrote it because I wanted to know what kind of government, what kind of Republican constitution did the Founding Fathers want to create, and what I discovered was that it was something absolutely magnificent in its idea of self-government and individual liberty. And then I realized that we had lost it in the 2 centuries since then. So my question was, how'd that happen, and how do we restore it? And that brought me to Clarence Thomas. And so the takeaway is our Founding Fathers gave us the most modern idea in government that has yet come along, the idea of a self-governing republic, and we should cherish it with all our might.
Well, sir, we appreciate you. Clarence Thomas and the Lost Constitution. Myron Magnet joining us. Thank you, sir. You have a blessed day.
Thank you, and you too.
Very interesting hearing about the origins of Clarence Thomas from a cabin, kerosene lanterns to the Supreme Court. Of course, you're not going to hear that from the liberal media that vilify this good man. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next, well, I was wrong. I was wrong. Mr. Wright was wrong. I'll confess next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
There's really no start date on this, so it's not clear. Is this in effect as of right now? Will it be in effect sometime next month? The city is still trying to work that out. These are the final unofficial numbers for decriminalizing magic mushrooms. 89,000 people in favor, giving it that 50.5%, and the opposed 87,000 against. There are actually 8,400 of you here who undervoted, which means you didn't vote on this issue at all, didn't fill out yes or no. I say these are unofficial numbers because they are still absentee ballots to count, and if the city rejects your ballot for something like a signature issue, there's still time between now and May 16th before they are official. When Denver released the first results at 7 p.m., that included the majority of ballots turned in prior to Monday. Decriminalizing magic mushrooms was failing. Denver updated the results every 90 minutes, and it didn't change much, but the race was getting closer. And when 40,000 additional votes were counted between 1 a.m. and this afternoon, it had enough to pass. Denver police will now treat possession of magic mushrooms as its least priority. Between 2016 and 2018, there were only 158 arrests for possession, no more, says voters. And it's really the voters in this green area. You'll see the outline of Denver, the green.
Well, we won't see the outline of Denver. Good morning, Kevin Miller in the morning. KIDO Talk Radio. So I was wrong. The city of Denver, in a last-second move, has decriminalized magic mushrooms, and they're pretty happy about it in Colorado.
Areas are the ones that said yes to this. The gray areas of Denver did not want to decriminalize.
Yeah, that doesn't really
mushrooms.
Translate well.
Kyle, this really has nothing to do with dealing magic mushrooms. That is still illegal. But it goes to show that the 8,400 people who didn't vote this at all really had an impact on this decision.
And there we have it from 9 News in Denver, Colorado. So here we have another city. And Colorado, I mean, it's a beautiful state. You don't have to love Coors Beer. You don't have to love Pikes Peak. You don't have to love the Denver Broncos. Colorado is like the West on steroids. And unfortunately, Colorado is an example to all of us. Colorado at one time, one of the most Republican states, not only in the West, but in the entire country. And then you had, and this is documented in publications, two or three big money liberal millionaires that came in and flipped the state. We've had, the former Congressman Tom Tancredo tell us that. Some of our most conservative friends, Dr. Lamero, still live in Colorado. And you've gone from a conservative state to, on a good day, a purple state, not a blue state, not a red state. But you have the libs coming in there, and then they legalize the drugs, and they decriminalize. I mean, why be sanitary about it? Why be politically correct? They, with this decriminalization, now magic mushrooms are legal, all in the name of making you feel better. Now, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, some people will say, well, Kevin Miller, the opioid problem is much more staggering. Big Pharma is to blame. Yeah, Big Pharma is a lot like Big Oil. However, there's a reason why the mushrooms are illegal. They're not good for you. And the pro-drug pushers are very brilliant, going through the avenue of medicinal purposes, unproven with magic mushrooms. Oregon, they're debating the whole thing. See, to me, none of this makes sense because whether it's mushrooms or marijuana, it's still illegal federally. Now, we can talk about states' rights, but it is the supremacy clause that rules this country. More on that in a minute. First, let's get you to work safely and on time. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Dave. And I'm Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Coming up, it appears catch and release, well, they're not coming back. And the measles outbreaks, could it be explained that we're letting people into this country that have the chicken pox and the measles? And that's the reason why the measles are blowing up all over the place, as opposed to people not being vaccinated in America. We'll talk more about that and get your thoughts coming up. But back to this issue involving decriminalization. I was talking to a friend of mine last night, Garrett, working on one of my endless projects, my endless backup projects to the great career that is broadcasting, that is talk radio, designed to augment what we do here, to decide to strengthen this program. And he said, you and your Miller Minute, you're going to decriminalize everything. And the point of the Miller Minute, it's not to decriminalize everything, but that's it seems to be where these certain states are going. Magic mushrooms stop pain, so we're going to decriminalize it. Are there medical studies to back this up? No. Let's take a look at the real authorities. Is law enforcement in favor of this? Probably not. It makes what we're doing and debating here in the Treasure Valley when it comes to hemp seem like small potatoes. I didn't really get to it yesterday where you have, 1,800, maybe 2,000 people taking the plight of the hemp truck drivers, saying it's an embarrassment. I'll tell you what's an embarrassment is not knowing the laws. I'll tell you what's an embarrassment. I'll tell you what's really an embarrassment is ignorance of the law. And what's another embarrassment is people that continue to pump up their own personal agenda at the expense of rules, laws, and safety. Rules, laws, and safety, right? Borders, boundaries, and culture. That's really what's a shame. Look, I'm digressing. Legalizing mushrooms is wrong, and the federal government needs to come in and tell the city of Denver that's enough. Now, you don't think it can happen here? Tell that to the people of Colorado. And look, Governor Little, no marijuana here. Thank you, Governor. Somebody that gets it. The conservatives in the Idaho House and Senate, we don't agree with them always. Certainly they don't agree with us always. But that's the right thing to do. We had our friend Ted, who's trying to raise money to get a drug dog for Middleton. He was at a seminar saying you wouldn't believe the amount of pro-drug money that is flooding into Idaho. Flooding into Idaho to make us Cheech and Chong. To sit back and go, hey, let's have a good time. Well, you can have a good time, but you don't have to do drugs. More on that coming up, and solving the vaccination versus the measles dilemma. All that and more. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. By the way, thank you for joining us. 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Maggie. Oh, what could have been. You ever take a look at the domains? And I mean, you probably don't. You have a life. You know, you take a look at these domains and you think, I'm going to type this in and I'm going to do this. So I thought about this website, Best Coast Football. Best Coast Football, right? It's been like $2.99. Finally, somebody bought it and they're selling it for $1,500. Of course, value is so kind of strange, but I guess that's what you're doing when you're trying to kill time on the GoDaddy website. Good morning. I mean, crazy domains, right? Good morning, Kevin Miller with you here. Coming up next, our thoughts on the Supremacy Clause, magic mushrooms, and the drug war here in the Treasure Valley and throughout the West. But first, KIDO Talk Radio is your home for Fox News on the radio. And because we are so proud of our affiliation with Fox News, we love having the Fox News reporters on. And this gentleman in particular, he's an all-star with us, live from London. Simon Owen joining us now. Simon, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin.
So here we have it. What's old is new. What's new is old again. It's back to those crazy Iranians and a lot of controversy considering they're pulling away from the nuclear deal. What's the latest, sir?
Yeah, there's certainly been a flurry of activity in the sphere of U.S.-Iran tensions in the past few days, but particularly the last 24 hours. And the reason for that partly is that yesterday was exactly a year since President Trump announced that the U.S. would be quitting the Iran nuclear deal, this 2015 agreement between Iran and 6 world powers, whereby the deal was Iran would rein in its nuclear activity, thereby trying to allay Western concerns that it was moving towards building a nuclear bomb, and in return the West would relax sanctions. Now, no one, even the Trump administration, disputes that Iran has, as far as they're aware, stuck to the terms of this deal. It's allowed all the inspectors, and it was asked to. All those inspectors have come back with a big thumbs up each time they've been into that country. But the president had long-standing concerns about this deal. He didn't like the way it was struck in the first place. So he quit a year ago. And to mark that anniversary, a couple of things happened. The U.S. announced new sanctions on Iran's economy, going after its exports of metals. And a few hours before the White House made that announcement, Iran said that, yes, it is scaling back its commitments under the nuclear deal. It says it is not going to violate the terms of the deal, but it is going to run things a bit closer to the line.
When we take a look at, a lot of people have said that the president has really ratcheted up the sanctions on the Iranians. Any indication that that might be having an impact here?
Yes, I think it's beyond dispute that it's having a fairly enormous impact on the Iranian economy. Inflation has soared. There is effectively an economic meltdown in that country. We've seen protests against the government. So, yes, I think the sanctions are having a real impact, and they've already gone after the oil and banking sectors, and now these new penalties target metal exports, which behind oil is pretty much Iran's biggest export industry. So the screws are being tightened further. Now, in the same time, you have the other signatories to this deal, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and China, who've spent the past year trying to keep this agreement alive. They've tried to figure out clever payment mechanisms that might circumvent the American sanctions and that sort of thing. But it looks like they've not done enough as far as Iran is concerned, because the Iranian president yesterday, as this talk about scaling back its commitments was announced, Hassan Rouhani also said that the other signatories have 60 days to put in place mechanisms that will shield Iran's economy from U.S. sanctions. And he said if they don't do that, then nuclear work will be stepped up. And specifically what he said is that Iran would resume enrichment of highly enriched uranium. And in plain English, that's the stuff that can be used in nuclear weapons.
Boy, that is troubling. Any reaction throughout the world, maybe from our friend Mr. Putin at all on this?
Well, the other signatories have sort of different things to say about this. I mean, these are not traditional allies of Iran. Certainly, if you look at Britain, France, and Germany, there's more of friendship there with Russia and China. But certainly, the Europeans are singing from roughly the same hymn sheet, that they want this deal to survive, but they are warning Iran not to violate it. And the Brits British said yesterday, if that happens, there will be consequences. Russia, for its part, blamed the US, said that, essentially the US had forced Iran to take this action, had put too much pressure on, and had gone overboard on trying to pressure the Iranian regime. And China, for its part, sort of sat on the fence, as it tends to do in this process, and said that both sides should exercise restraint. So, yes, a blame there from Russia towards the United States, but the Europeans saying that they want this to survive, but I think they must recognize that after a year, it is still there. To be fair, the deal is still in place, but it's on shaky ground.
Simon, we appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Simon Owen joining us. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about the situation in Denver, Colorado. They've legalized the magic mushrooms. If Colorado falls, could Idaho be next? Let's get to Sherlock in Nampa, who's been very patient with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Sherlock.
Well, and a fine morning to you. And appreciated the update on the current international situation. But I was driving along and had my radio tuned to your station when you mentioned within regard to the supremacy clause of the national constitution. I thought I might mention is that very few people are aware of the fact is that the supremacy clause is limited to the laws of the United States and the treaties thereof. What you've been talking about within regard to the color of law from the state of District of Columbia, which is not law. It is policy enacted by Congress for the New Deal, which is overlapped. But nevertheless, I don't want to go down. All I was doing to your screener, I said merely a caveat, so you'd know the difference. And very few people are aware of the fact that they have no idea of the difference between the two. Just trying to help.
I appreciate that, but you're a scholar. So, compared to me, sir. So what do you make of the lack of enforcement of federal law? And people are going to say, well, it's a states' rights issue, but then you would have the same thing with abortion, then you'd have the same thing with marriage.
Well, your points are well taken, and to expand upon it, when you say federal law, is it law of the United States, or is it the policy and the color of law of the District of Columbia? There's a vast difference, a chasm exists between the two. So whenever the laws of the United States that are enacted by Congress are very specific, whereas the policy of the United States of America, quote, goes back to the New Deal. That is the function of the New Deal of Franklin Roosevelt. And there is as I say, an abyss between the two. But unfortunately, the American people have always, quote, trusted government and accept, anything that comes out, that's the law. No, it's not the law. It's the policy that has been engendered.
Sherlock, we appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. Vaccinations, always a big story, right? Health. Is there anything more personal than health? Our own health? The health of our children, grandchildren, relatives? We are so blessed in America today. I know someone, maybe you have this person as well, in your life that's always nagging you about losing weight. Well, this is a young lady who was a caller of mine in Pittsburgh. And to this day, I get endless text messages from her concerning my health. And of course, we get that from our friends, our relatives. Sometimes people don't want to fat shame or whatever shame. And we take our health for granted. I know I take my health for granted. Think about how crucial it is. And for those that are struggling, that are in surgery, that are going to the hospital, God bless you. You're in our prayers. You are in my prayers every night. For some of us, we love to consider ourselves the masters of our own domain until we have that pain, maybe in our pelvis, maybe in our foot, maybe in our head, maybe we can't breathe correctly. And then we go into the medical industrial complex, right? These elaborate places where you have all the people that care, and the first thing they ask you is for your insurance card and then your copay. I'm always amazed, and with all due respect to the medical profession, at the hypocrisy of it all, where you need to take care of yourself. Okay, I'm taking care of myself. It'll be 6 weeks before you can see a doctor. Thank you, Obama, for that. But I digress. We've had vaccinations in the news, and like I said, I don't think there are many people that like to go to the hospital. By the way, God bless the parents whose little kids are in the hospital and those children that fight so bravely to go into these surgeries. God is truly with you. So yesterday we were covering the story in Oregon where it's going to be mandatory that if you send your kid to school, or even if you don't send your kid to school, you're going to get vaccinated whether you like it or not, because all of a sudden the measles have come back. And this has been an issue in Idaho back and forth about vaccinations, whether or not parents have the right to vaccinate. Coming up next, I'm going to share with you a story that could explain why all of a sudden the measles are coming back, why the chicken pox are coming back, why all the diseases that we've eradicated are coming back, and no one has enough guts to share that with you. That's next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Rolling right along, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So quickly, two stories, then we're going to get to your phone calls. ICE has already released 168,000 illegal immigrant family members into America, and the number is likely to surge as the border situation continues to blow up. Now, this is a shocker. According to the results of a pilot program, a staggering 87%, can you believe this? 87% of the released families are skipping their court dates. Adios, leaving judges to order them deported in absentia, and we can't track them. Family units are not appearing in great numbers. I mean, these are good people, right? These are good people. Why would they not want to be deported? In another story, Mexican officials find 289 migrants in a tractor-trailer, many of them children, including those infected with measles and other illnesses, including chickenpox. So the fact that all these folks are coming into the country illegally, they aren't being vaccinated. They're, some of them, not all of them. And again, let's not oversimplify and over-vilify. But when you bring people in that have been exposed to these diseases that America has eradicated, and all of a sudden it's popping up, why are we punishing Americans? But in my opinion, the press continues to avoid it. Let's get to your calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. We go to Hank in Boise. Hank, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning. Well, I'm a little bit probably older than most of you, but maybe your audience is. I'm practically almost 70 years old. But I remember the vaccinations for polio and chicken pox and stuff that were done by parents and by school officials, and nobody back to the 1950s, which is where my memory starts, ever disputed having vaccinations. Nobody in the political spectrum back there 50 or 60 years ago. The only people that were doing it were Christian scientists at that period of time. And it practically did eradicate chickenpox and measles throughout. And now people are all of a sudden up in arms and upset about it, and they've gotten lax about getting vaccinations and this stuff. And of course, with the importing of the Mexicans and the illegals in here, we're getting a lot of diseases that were eradicated earlier. Hell, vaccinations is what eliminated polio. You had regular polio. I faintly remember the some of the polio epidemics. They also, I remember back then that one time they sent a bad batch of polio and got some people sick with polio with some bad vaccinations. Where the virus was too strong in one particular batch. I remember that in the late 50s. But I think that there's a lot of, I think there's much to do about stuff in the vaccinations and stuff like that. I think a lot of this stuff has a lot to do about nothing. And I think that vaccinations are necessary if you're going to, protect children and protect, I'm not a liberal. I don't believe in the but I don't see the sense of not vaccinating your child if because there are complications from measles and chicken pox. I mean, there's certain side effects you can get from this stuff that is potentially life-threatening. And I think the people's attitudes on this is a little bit on the paranoid side. Is what
you have a lot of people on the right and in Idaho that are not down with the vaccinations. You have people calling it witch science.
Yeah, but that's what makes me wonder. This is what makes my curiosity going is this was not the case among conservatives back in the 50s and 60s. This is what puzzles me. I mean, I'm just going through my own memories of this whole thing. This thing about vaccinations or compulsory vaccinations is a relatively recent thing in our political spectrum. There was nobody back in those times. But at that time, we had common waves of mumps, measles, and stuff. And I remember catching some of that stuff as a young kid in the 50s. Now, what are you going to, and having those vaccinations, it stops from it spreading and giving it to other kids and so on. I don't see.
Well, do you think it should be mandatory then?
I think that
you don't have a choice.
I don't think that you can. I don't believe in forcing it. But if the kids are going to public school, where other kids are exposed to it, I do think it has to be mandatory. If the parents, I do believe in parental control, but in situations where you have other parents' kids in a school setting where kids are in close contact with each other like that, I don't think it's fair or right to make other kids sick because you didn't choose to vaccinate your kids. Not only the fact that your kid could get sick, but he would infect other kids as well. I mean, is that right? And I just don't understand what among conservatives has shifted in 50 or 60 years. That's what puzzles me about this whole debate. So that's my point on this.
Thank you, Hank.
Bye.
Bye. Kurt in Boise with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Kurt.
Good morning, Kevin. Well, I think we should have, I know it's going to sound very governmental, but I think it's almost mandatory because when an epidemic starts like it's starting now or it has been going on for a while, not only the immigrants coming in, but other people that they let in legally, they bring these diseases from their countries that we eradicated almost worldwide and bringing it back and introducing it to us. So if I'm not, when the people came into Ellis Island, did they not get inoculated or sent back home when they had typhoid or tuberculosis or something? I mean, we're opening up the floodgates to these people coming in. They're not only bringing their religion, the Muslims, like they want to cut off our heads, but they're bringing these diseases that we eradicated. So I think they need to really think about making it mandatory.
Good point, Kurt. Thank you for the call. Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Dave.